My name is Daniel Brandt. I'm 36 years old, and exactly 4 months after burying my wife Anna, my own family and I were sitting in my dining room in Berlin-Schöneberg while they tried to take the roof over my head. My brother Jonas tossed a yellow notice with a 30-day eviction onto the tablecloth, almost like it was a joke. My father Helmut said in an icy voice that I was too broke and too exhausted to fight back. They believed I would break down, sign, and hand over our house, Anna's life insurance, and the rest of my life. They had no idea that this very house was only the beginning of their downfall. The evening felt like any other obligatory visit to my parents. I had made dinner myself and set out the coffee, even though grief was crushing my chest. The house on Lindenstrasse had been ours for 3 years, a bright old building with stucco ceilings, wood floors, and a small garden where Anna had loved to read on Sundays. After her illness, it had remained my only place of peace. But my mother Krista had insisted on this dinner, supposedly to check on my emotional state. With her, care always meant control. My father ran a shipping company in Hamburg and acted at home as if he were chairing a board meeting. My mother scrutinized every word, every gesture, every silence. And Jonas, my younger brother, was the golden son, deputy head of the company, polished, loud, and certain that everything was owed to him. During dinner, my mother criticized my appearance, my tiredness, the way I'd let myself go. I should stop wallowing and find something sensible, maybe a steady job somewhere. They all believed I was unemployed and had been living off Anna's income. I didn't correct them. When I cleared the plates and brought the coffee, the mood shifted. My father leaned back, my brother opened his leather bag, and I had no idea what was coming. Then Jonas pulled out a thick folder and slid it across the table. It landed next to my cup with a dull thud. "Read it," he said flatly. I opened it and saw first a lawsuit against me and behind it, the eviction notice for the house. My heart pounded. I looked at my mother, but she just kept calmly drinking her coffee. My father claimed Anna had burdened the company with debt, that she'd borrowed money from the shipping firm. "That's a lie," I said. "Anna would never have taken on secret debts." Jonas laughed and claimed the company held signed promissory notes and internal invoices. Before, I might have doubted myself. Not anymore. They were accusing my dead wife of fraud, and my anger turned ice cold. My mother said in a honey-sweet voice that I shouldn't get worked up, that they only wanted to protect me before the case went public. My father talked about a settlement. I should transfer the house and assign the insurance, and then the claim would be dropped. They looked at me like I was already defeated. I pushed the folder back. "I'm not signing anything." My father turned hard and threatened that their family lawyer, Dr. Konrad Vetter, would crush me in court. I stacked the plates and replied that Vetter was welcome to meet me. The three of them left, offended and furious. When the door shut, the silence in the house suddenly felt sharp as glass, and I knew they had only just begun. The next morning I went, numb, to the market on the main street. At the checkout, my card was declined. Tried again? Declined again for less than 50 euros. At home, I opened my banking app. My checking account showed 0. At 6 that morning, someone had transferred the entire balance to a business account belonging to my father's company. Not a hack, just an old joint access he'd set up under my name 15 years earlier. Sitting in my car, I understood what they were doing. They wanted to starve me out financially so I couldn't afford a lawyer. At that exact moment, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice sounded satisfied, almost gleeful. He called the account access a down payment and said it was time I came to my senses. He gave me 48 hours to sign the settlement, or else Dr. Vetter would proceed. I saved the message, backed it up twice, and smiled for the first time in weeks. The money had only been bait. My real savings sat in an encrypted federal account my father could never touch. And on top of that, his voicemail had handed me the perfect threat. He himself had spelled out the extortion. At home, I opened the safe behind the bookshelf and took out my work ID. It didn't say unemployed, didn't say widower, didn't say victim. It said, Director of Threat Finance, Federal Office for Cyber and Financial Intelligence. Krista, Jonas, and Helmut had no idea who I really was. After university, I'd worked first for customs investigations, then for the federal office. They knew none of this because they never listened. They thought I did something with computers from home. To them, I had to stay small. That blindness was about to cost them dearly. That afternoon, I heard a heavy truck rumbling outside my house. Through the window, I saw Jonas in my driveway, directing two luxury cars off the truck bed, a red Ferrari and a black Porsche, both his. He came to the door grinning when I stepped outside, explaining he was just temporarily storing his cars there, since the house would soon belong to the company anyway. The driver looked visibly uncomfortable. Jonas was savoring the humiliation. I told him calmly that he was blocking my driveway. He said he'd send a lawyer if I didn't like it, and smugly reminded me about the empty account. I said nothing. Instead, I took photos with my phone of both cars, the license plates, and the blocked driveway. Jonas could tell I was withholding the anger he expected, and it made him nervous. I went back inside and called a tow company in Neukölln, known for its merciless fees. Minutes later, two heavy tow trucks rolled up. The drivers checked my property deed, had me sign the release, and hauled Jonas's cars onto their flatbeds with cold efficiency. As the Ferrari was winched up with a screech, Jonas reappeared at the door, screaming, his face red, his voice cracking. He wanted to call the police, but the cars were already gone. I handed him the tow company's business card and suggested he manage his finances better. Then I shut the door. 3 hours later, he was banging on the door again, completely beside himself, shouting about where his cars were. I told him the police knew exactly where they were. On my property, where he himself had left them. He went white. Storage fees were costing him more per day than he earned in a whole weekend. As he cursed on the stairs below, I felt nothing but calm. The next morning, I drove downtown to the offices of Vetter and Partners. I wore an oversized coat, looked deliberately worn down, and carried a cheap notepad. At the front desk, they looked at me like I'd wandered in from the rain. In the conference room sat my father, my brother, and Dr. Vetter at a long table, grinning as I walked in. Vetter was a man in an expensive suit and a gold watch, the kind of lawyer who seems untouchable until he sees the wrong paperwork. He asked about my attorney. I said quietly that I couldn't afford one. Jonas sneered that I was broke. My father claimed Anna had taken out risky loans and damaged the company, and they slid forged promissory notes toward me, signed with Anna's name. I pretended to be rattled, but really I was studying the formatting, the date errors, the account numbers. The supposed transfers ran through a clearinghouse in the Cayman Islands, one under direct surveillance by my own department. My father assured Vetter everything was genuine and notarized, exactly what I needed. I pretended to choke up, pressed the folder to my chest, and begged for time. Then I rushed out of the room, stumbled down the hallway, and heard Jonas laughing that I was broken. In the elevator, I straightened up and gripped the evidence tightly. They had confirmed their own crimes in writing. Back at my office, I connected the documents to the financial flows, analyzing the fake accounts, the fraudulent invoices, the signature trails. The next day, Vetter invited me to a mediation in his glass office tower. I showed up again looking defeated, sat down at the table, and let them believe they'd beaten me down. Vetter claimed my wife had siphoned millions from the shipping company and lied to me about it. My father talked about ruined liquidity. Jonas pushed for my signature on the house and the insurance. I even let my voice break and asked about releasing the funds. Finally, Vetter openly threatened to take the matter to court and have me declared legally incompetent due to depression and financial overwhelm. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. I broke into staged panic, grabbed the papers, and fled. In the elevator, I breathed calmly and called my team. That same evening, the federal office froze my family's company files and traced the connections to the Cayman Islands account. I assembled the documents for the court hearing and filed my father's voicemail, the towing records, and the forged invoices into a red folder. On the morning of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom at the Tempelhof-Schöneberg District Court, again looking worn, shoulders slumped. Vetter sat with Helmut and Jonas at the plaintiff's table, already talking about obvious guilt. When he called me a financially confused widower, I stood up. I told the judge that the plaintiffs had used forged documents to seize an estate while simultaneously concealing international money laundering through their shipping company. Then I laid down the red folder. As the judge reviewed the account flows, the signature comparisons, and the federal reports, the room went silent. Vetter went pale. I stated that the company had already been frozen for 48 hours, that they were insolvent, and that they could no longer intimidate me. Vetter stood up, stammered something about deception, and withdrew right there in the courtroom. Jonas chased after him, grabbed his arm, and shouted that he couldn't just leave. Vetter pulled away and said that if they ever bothered him again, he'd cooperate with investigators himself. The judge brought down the gavel, dismissed the case, barred any further claims against Anna's estate, and ordered a criminal investigation. My family stood there like shipwreck survivors. Later, I looked my father in the eye. He finally understood that the son he'd treated like staff for years was exactly the man who had just brought down his company. I stayed calm, even as he tried to claw back the old superiority in his voice. But it was gone. Outside the courthouse, there was no press waiting, just the cold Berlin air. I got into my car, put my hands on the wheel, and breathed for the first time since Anna's death, without that weight on my chest. 2 weeks later, I returned to Lindenstrasse. The house was officially mine again, alone. My family's company was frozen, its accounts under investigation, the eviction overturned. I stood in the empty living room where Anna used to drink her tea and for the first time heard no voices trying to make me small. I left the curtains open, sat down on the floor, and opened my laptop. No threats, no arguments, just silence. I realized I was no longer waiting for their love. I had won myself back, and that was worth more than any house. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a widower. I felt like the man who had finally reclaimed his own life.